Which roster is most improved going into the 2023 season, plus sleeper picks for offensive and defensive player of the year.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Locked On NFL. He is Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or follow wherever you get your podcasts. And Tone, we have a jam-packed show for you today. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, and when you enter promo code LockedOnNFL, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Let's start with most improved rosters, because I think most teams, I would say 31 out of 32 fan bases are pretty optimistic right now. I don't know if the Arizona Cardinals fan base is optimistic, right? But the rest of the league, and I'm sorry, Cardinals fans, if you are, but the rest of the league, I think, is feeling pretty good. Even if you're the Texans, who picked second overall, or you're a team like the Panthers, who obviously traded up for the first pick, the Bears, who had the top pick. All these teams feel good about where they're at. And so it's time to look at all of the offseason moves. And there's still a few fringe roster moves that could change some things. I think the Bills obviously signing Leonard Floyd earlier this week. But what roster do you think is the most improved going into 2023?
It's a good question, and I have two answers. I'm going to cheat a little bit. The one that I believe got exactly what they needed was the New York Jets. They got exactly what they needed. The team was playing well. All they needed was a competent quarterback, and they got a Hall of Fame quarterback. First ballot Hall of Fame quarterback with a bullet. And I know he's older, but he's still who he is. And so that's an easy one for me, right? I think the most improved roster from top to bottom is the Houston Texans. I just think they did a whale of a job in free agency, unlike the previous years. I think the adding, D'Amico Ryans, and I think there are people that wanted to play for him, right? And then I thought they drafted extremely well, and they went heavy in the draft up top. They had obviously the second overall pick, but they ended up with the third overall pick too. They went heavy. They said, we're going to get a quarterback, we're going to get our pass rusher, and this is what it is. So I thought they drafted extremely well. I thought that they supplemented the fact that they had Dameon Pierce from last year, and they added a running back to that. But really, for me, from top to bottom, I think the Texans are the team that drastically improved their roster the most. But I think the most important addition was probably Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. And I ain't breaking any news here. I think everybody thought that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Rodgers move completely changes the landscape. But looking at the Jets, I think a lot of people last year, myself included, I think you are in this group as well, Tone, thought that they were a talented team. Mm-hmm. And quarterback just held them back. And when you watched them, it's like, oh, well, they have some weapons. And in Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, when he was in there before he got injured, it sounds like he's going to be back. I think a lot of people would say the Jets. So I'm glad you mentioned them. They're not my team either, but they are a team that, to me, fringe Super Bowl contender. I think they should make the playoffs. It's dependent on a lot of factors, but just overall talent, I think, is there. I'm going to go with a different team, and maybe it's not fair to say most improved, but I'm going to call them the most improved anyway because of where they were at last year, fourth in a bad NFC South. And I know they finished with 7 wins, and 3 of the teams finished with 7 wins. But the Atlanta Falcons, they don't have many question marks to me. They have a big question mark at quarterback, so I get it. It's a big question mark there. But I don't think they're worse at quarterback this year. Desmond Ridder will probably be better than what they got from Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder last year. And they added Bijan Robinson, who should sort of transform the way they do business on offense, because you have him, you have Tyler Algier, who obviously had a really good rookie year. I think there's a real chance now that the combo of Drake London and Kyle Pitts Jonnu Smith, by the way, so you can play a couple of tight ends as well. I think they should be pretty dangerous on offense. I love an under-the-radar signing I really liked. Scotty Miller signs a 1-year deal with the Falcons. I think he's pretty dynamic. You get him for $1 million. I think that's a pretty good signing, especially with all those trees. You have a short, quick guy that fits in. But a guy I know really well, Jesse Bates, they added him at safety. They traded for Jeff Okudah from the Lions. They added a veteran like Trey Flowers. They already have AJ Terrell on defense. Obviously, we know about Grady Jarrett. They took a flyer on Bud Dupree. They signed David Onyemata, and I probably butchered his name a little bit, but long-term Saints defensive lineman can play. And they also got Calais Campbell, who can still play. And so I look at the Falcons, and if I had to predict today, I would say they make the playoffs. That's how I feel. I'm pretty bullish on them. I think that defense is going to be solid top to bottom. They have a young quarterback, but they have weapons around him. That's a recipe that could work, especially in the NFC South.
You know what? And if you're watching YouTube, you see me shaking this ink pen at James Rapien. This is what people have done to me my whole life when I made a good point that they wish they had made. So I'm doing it to you. You know what? You are spot on. And shout out to Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons too, man. But you know what Terry Fontenot did when he took over? This is a GM that came from New Orleans. At first, I thought he was slow playing it. I mean, you get in and you just draft this guy. He's safe. And Drake London is safe. He did it again, sort of in the draft when he said, okay, we're just going to take this running back. It's safe. And it's like against conventional wisdom that you take a tight end in the top 5, that you sign Arthur Smith anyway to be your head coach. And then you take a wide receiver who was a 6'5" slot guy. And then you take a running back. And then here we come in free agency, and it's like, boom. And we should have saw it coming because what he did was he solidified his offensive line by retaining his own guys, right? Something that Jaguar fans know I'm angry that they didn't do. But they solidified it by re-signing their own guys, keeping their own guys in-house. And then when you look up, they didn't play it safe at all. They actually have rebuilt their roster. So when you think about all those dudes you mentioned and Bijan, and then you throw in the fact that Cordell Patterson is still there, and you're like, Arthur Smith is going to have a field trip every Sunday if he gets his way and if Desmond Ridder can deliver. So agree with you. That's a very, very good selection, and I look right past it.
Yeah, I think we could look up, and I was really close. The 2011 Bengals, they were a team that, much like I mentioned the Cardinals, going into that season, no one expected them to win a game. And you look back and it was like, oh, young quarterback, really good young receiver in AJ Green, solid veteran running back, and a really good defense. And you look up and they won 9 games. They went 9-7 and made the playoffs. Had no business making the playoffs that early. And I see the Falcons and I'm like, man, Scotty Miller can be your 3. You have a guy like Kyle Pitts who's just poised for a breakout. Bijan Robinson can line up all over. You don't have to play him and give him 300 carries because you have Tyler Algier as well. This is a run-first offense that can run some play action like Desmond Ridder was used to. You have guys that can go downfield and make plays downfield when you need a big play, and the defense can carry you a bit with some solid veterans. I like the recipe. We'll see. Yeah, a lot of it's dependent on Desmond Ridder, but I watched him at the University of Cincinnati. He doesn't make many mistakes. He's going to be okay with punting the ball and letting the defense hold the fort down. And I still think that can get you to a certain level if your defense is good enough in today's NFL. So we'll see with the Falcons. They already won 7 games. I think they could get to 9, maybe 10 wins this season. Up next, let's start with offense. It's an offensive league. Let's discuss Offensive Player of the Year, our sleeper picks for an award that has been dominated by wide receivers. We'll do that next right here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs make you look good. I've been wearing them for quite some time, and whether it's their awesome joggers to practice when I'm watching the Bengals or other NFL teams, of course, or whether it's their stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and give your leg that truly sculpted look. Bird Dogs has something for everyone. And, well, let's be honest here. It's summer. Well, they have anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that helps you cool and stay dry all day long. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. So go there now, birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Tone, let's dive into some different options here that we have for offensive player of the year. Sleeper picks. The past couple have been wide receivers. Justin Jefferson last year, the year prior, Cooper Kupp. Who do you think could take home the award this year?
Well, I everything I do is pretty kind of well planned and thought out. I mentioned the Jets, right? Yeah, so I'm going with Garrett Wilson. I think you see you see how I set you up with the okie doke, man. I'm going with Garrett Wilson because if Aaron Rodgers is going to have the impact that we think, it ain't going to be because he's throwing the ball to Adam Lazard, right? It's going to be because that kid that played really, really well last year with a little boy at quarterback now has a grown man. And he's the type of dude that Aaron Rodgers begged for ever since Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings and all of these guys left. Garrett Wilson gets in and out of his breaks. He's a deep ball catcher. He's a bad ball catcher, and Aaron doesn't throw very many bad balls. He's also really, really competitive. He is why I actually liked Chris Olave a lot coming out because I said it kind of reminds me of a little Marvin Harrison a little bit. Marvin Harrison Sr., not the son. But Wilson actually turned out to be a big play guy and a better version of what I thought he could be coming in. So I'm going to ride with Garrett Wilson, and I'm going to say that Garrett Wilson, because of Aaron Rodgers' presence, is going to benefit mightily and greatly in that division and have a real good shot at being my surprise pick for Offensive Player of the Year.
He could. There's no doubt. I think he has the talent to do so, and you saw it last year. I mean, he hit the ground running and was a big part of that offense, and you mentioned it with question marks at quarterback. There is no question mark this year. If Aaron Rodgers is on the field, he's the best quarterback that Garrett has played with. So I agree with you that is certainly one that should be in the running. To me, I think the obvious candidates, I'll just go over some obvious ones, like Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he be in the mix for Offensive Player of the Year? I'm not naming him, by the way. He's someone that could certainly be in the running. To me, though, just looking across the league, it's tough. But something is telling me that offense in Seattle is going to be better than people realize.
Ooh.
And Tyler Lockett, big part of it. Geno Smith won an award last year, Comeback Player of the Year. But to me, you're telling me DK Metcalf doesn't have a little more in the tank? Wide receiver. I'm going to stick with wide receiver as well. I think when you put a guy like Lockett on one side, Jackson Smith and Jigba over the middle, you may look up and DK Metcalf may have 20 touchdowns this season.
Yeah.
And that might be a little bullish, but it might not, because you might not want to double team him as much. Because from a skill standpoint, not a physical standpoint, a skill standpoint, he might be the third best receiver on his team, if that makes sense. He's so physical that I think he could look up and just be this dominant presence and have a ton of touchdowns. And it's because these other two guys are commanding so much attention as well. So DK Metcalf, sleeper, under the radar. I don't think anyone would pick him for my sleeper for Offensive Player of the Year.
It almost seems like because of Chase and because of Justin Jefferson, it really sometimes, and even T. Higgins, sometimes it doesn't seem like we forget about DK, and he was all the rage. He was the talk coming into when he first got to Seattle. It seems like he's a little bit of a forgotten man, where folks aren't putting him in that super elite category. But now with Njigba there, you can't do the things that teams have been doing to him in the past, and now he's going to be a wide open dude running down the field, making big plays. And I think, to piggyback off what you said, he might not be the most skilled across the board, but he's the one that will make probably the amount of big plays. And when you make those big plays, that gets a lot of people's attention. So DK Metcalf is also a very, very good candidate. You want to do defense now?
Yeah, we can do defense if you want to. I think looking at it, just looking at the history, because that's what I like to do when I make these, these sleeper picks. The past three, you got to get after the passer. And you look back at it, outside of Stephon Gilmore, all of these guys dating back to 2014 have been defensive ends. Luke Kuechly snapped that in 2013 as a linebacker. So if you want to make a sleeper pick, Tony, let's maybe think pass rusher. That's probably the smart pick, but we can discuss that. Our sleeper picks for Defensive Player of the Year coming up next.
All right, running it down here. Third segment on Wednesday with James Rapien and Tony Wiggins here on Locked On NFL. Just a quick recap. We talked about potential players of the year on offense and most improved rosters as a whole. We've named a couple of them, but now we're going to go to potential defensive player of the year for defense. I'm going to break the streak of going with an edge rusher, even though that's the easiest one to do and they have a huge effect. If I was going with edge rusher, I'd go with TJ Watt because he's coming back off an injury, and I think he's going to come back with a vengeance. But I'm not going to go there. You know where I'm going to go? I'm going to go back to the AFC East. And there's a reason, and I want you to hear me out on this. I think the Miami Dolphins are going to play ahead a lot because of the way they're structured on offense with their explosiveness. And that means they're going to be on defense and they're going to be ahead. And I think they're going to finally let Jalen Ramsey get stuck at corner the way he's supposed to be instead of moving around like this hybrid piece. I think Jalen Ramsey is going to have a shot to be the defensive player of the year because it's the perfect team. He has another good corner, a great corner on the opposite side of him. They have weapons on offense that could score just like that in an instant, even at running back with Devin A-Chain and Mostert and all of those guys. And I keep hearing rumors of Zeke may even go down there. I think the offensive line has improved. I think with the healthy Tua and now with a capable backup with Mike White, I just think they're going to play ahead so much. Similar to 2017 when Jalen had his best year here in Jacksonville. What's going to happen is teams are going to try him and they're going to go at him. And instead of him being a part-time corner and not getting the reps I believe that he needed to be as sharp as he should have against guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Mike Evans, I think by him being at corner, focusing on corner, solely on corner, because they already have great safeties, a young great safety, I think Jalen Ramsey is going to have the chance to prove that he is him again like he did once before.
Look at you. Look at you. Banking on the old Jags, Jacksonville. See, I used to call you a Dallas homer, and now I'm just going to call you.
Yeah.
No, I get it, and you don't want to bet against talent, and so I totally understand that. Just some favorites, obviously Myles Garrett, right? Micah Parsons.
Always.
We could go those routes, and so I just want to hammer that home. That's not who I'm picking either. Also, is it weird to say that I think Aaron Donald he's not mine because it's Aaron Donald, and you can't pick him, is a sleeper? I'm going to use this to talk about the Rams for 1 second. Everyone's buried them. Everyone's buried them. Mm-hmm. Everybody. And just assumes they're going to stink. I'm not so sure that's the case. I actually think the Rams are going to be pretty good. So I'll buy your Rams stock. It might be a sinking stock. It may burn me. But in this Bitcoin virtual currency world, I'll buy the Rams stock now after they got crushed last year following a Super Bowl win. I think Aaron Donald might have a Defensive Player of the Year type season. That said, I guess it's time for me to get to the guy, and I'm sticking with defensive line, and I'm going with an interior guy, someone that Bengals fans know, AFC fans know, Bills fans certainly know.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Is in a contract year. I think he's, as weird as it sounds, underrated in the NFL because he plays on a team with Patrick Mahomes and for years Tyreek Hill and obviously Travis Kelce, and you got Andy Reid, and you think about offense, and the Chiefs defensively have given up a lot, but you know the one guy who doesn't give up a lot, who is a game changer, game wrecker, Chris Jones. He's in a contract year. He's probably going to become the highest paid. It would not shock me if he plays so well this year, he becomes the highest paid defensive player in football, whether it's with the Chiefs or elsewhere, Chris Jones is my sleeper pick. And I almost feel like that is a cop-out because of how talented he is, but I actually think he fits the sleeper mold because I'm not sure anyone would really pick him. And I haven't looked at the FanDuel odds, to be honest with you, but I think he is a sleeper. I don't think many people would be in on Chris Jones for Defensive Player of the Year.
It's a good point. He's also a guy who can rush the passer, and they'll set him out wide. This is a testament to how good you are. When they take you from inside and put you outside on passing down. That's just how good. That's how good this kid is, man. So I had this discussion the other day, and I'm glad I was able to bring it up now. That someone asked me, okay, outside of Aaron Donald, which interior lineman is most likely to be a first ballot Hall of Famer? Thoughts were Grady Jarrett. Mm-hmm. The thoughts were obviously Chris Jones was one. Fletcher Cox. I said it ain't even close. It's Chris Jones. Chris Jones, up until, and it still may be valid, I think Sapp was the last one. There's only 6 first ballot Hall of Fame defensive tackles. First ballot Hall of Fame defensive tackles. Mm-hmm. Chris Jones going to be number 7. Well, Aaron Donald will be number 8. Whoever retires first is going to be number 7, and then they're going to be number 8. That's just, he is that good at 6'5", and I remember he came out in the draft. He was 6'5", just a tad under 300 pounds. And when you watch his tape at Mississippi State, he always flashed, but the guy would always get away from him. And I was talking to a draft, I can't remember who it was, but one of the national draft guys, it may have even been a former GM. I said, if he ever learns to finish, he might be the best in the league. And he's a finisher. If he gets close to you, you do not get away from him. And that's a guy who was a second round pick who's now a first ballot Hall of Fame. That's why I tell everybody all the time, man, when you look at the draft doesn't end on Thursday night. They're going to be people that you get that have a real good shot at being like the best in the business. And Chris Jones right now for kids coming out of high school, because Aaron Donald is an anomaly. Like 6'1", 6'2", 280 pounds, thinking about being like a Hall of Famer, right? But you see a lot of these kids now, they're 6'4", 6'5", 265, 270. I think all of them want to be edge rushers. But when college coaches talk to them about adding 35 pounds and becoming a great player inside, the example for that they can use is Chris Jones, because that's exactly what he is.
And just looking, he finished 3rd last year in the voting, only won first place vote, excuse me. Hassan Reddick was 4th, Myles Garrett 5th, Max Crosby, Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, Matt Judon, Minka Fitzpatrick. The first 2 were Nick Bosa. Obviously, he won the award. Micah Parsons was 2nd. So we'll see. I mean, I could see Sauce Gardner would be interesting. Quinnen Williams would be interesting, but certainly some options. I still think that Chris Jones flies under the radar in his impact in a contract year. He's 28 years old. So he's right smack dab in his prime. Could certainly see him taking home the award, man. It's wild. The season's going to be here, by the way, Tone. This offseason has flown. Yeah. I know some are like, oh, yeah, summer. And I'm already looking like, oh, my goodness, camp is about to be here. So we're going to have you covered every step of the way right here on Locked On NFL. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow wherever you get your podcasts. And for Tony Wiggins, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening and watching Locked On NFL.